The universe tried to tell humans that they were the lowest of the low, unworthy and unwanted vermin. Humans didn't get the memo. Zachary Allen, human mechanic extraordinaire, worked his ass off in the bustling spaceport of Zeta Prime, repairing a piece of shit alien spacecraft engine. Grime and sweat clung to Zach's skin as his weathered hands manipulated metal struts, attempting to undo the mess an amateur alien mechanic had left behind. The asshole before him had jammed the ship's ion manifold in backwards, nearly fusing the hyperdrive coils. Cursing, Zach ripped out the burnt manifold, ignoring the third-degree burns that now peppered his thick human hands. He spat on the spaceport floor, trying to steady his nerves after what had nearly been a reactor meltdown. Dying in an atomic fireball wasn't exactly high on Zach's list. The port around him hummed with activity as a rainbow of alien races wandered to and fro, their myriad shapes painting the dingy metallic walls with a moving mural of exobiology. Zach ignored them. They certainly ignored him. The few eyes that did dart his direction bore expressions laden with fear, distaste, and condescension. He was used to it. Born and raised on the fringe mining colony of Tau Ceti, he'd been spit on and cursed out by more aliens than he cared to count. At this point, the insults rolled off him like water on oil. Zach set the new manifold in place, ignoring the strange stares from passing extraterrestrials, muttering obscenities as his numb fingers worked to connect the complex device. He didn't have time for alien bigotry or racism. He had a job to do, even if his stomach wanted to reject the notion of helping these ungrateful alien asshats. Zach never got to finish repairing that manifold. Before he could make the last connector snap into place, an earth-shattering explosion rocked the spaceport. A wave of heated pressure slammed into Zach, knocking him off the scaffold, clean onto his back. Sirens blared. Rubble flew through the air and rained down in massive chunks of jagged metal. Zach instinctively rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding being crushed by a massive steel beam that smashed into the floor like a dropped sledgehammer. He staggered to his feet, nose instantly assaulted by the acrid stench of burning metal and flesh, ears ringing like church bells. A thick cloud of cloying dust clogged his throat and covered his body in a coat of ashen snow. All around, aliens screamed and ran, trying to avoid the chunks of building that fell at random. Zach rammed through the throngs of panicking aliens, shoving them aside with strong arms. An overwhelming urge to help the injured pulsed like a drum through his veins, drowning out all thoughts for his own safety. Following the sounds of agonized roars and wails, he crouched among piles of still-burning wreckage and spied a Dresian soldier badly crushed within the metal corpse of a caved-in ship. Blue blood leaked from the creature's shattered exoskeleton, staining the deck plating. Zach grasped the buckled bulkhead pinning the soldier and heaved, thick muscles in his back and neck tightening with the effort. The metal groaned, then shrieked, as Zach slowly bent the half-ton plate up and away, allowing the Dresian to weakly drag himself free while moaning. The soldier gazed up at Zach with compound eyes full of what was unmistakably awe, his mandibles clicking. Zach just nodded and moved on, following the screams, freeing the trapped, ignoring his bleeding hands and burnt lungs. Someone had to help. Someone had to make this right. Failure was not an option. Zach wiped the last of the alien blood from his hands, having pulled a dozen wounded from the mangled wreckage. His breath came hard, lungs filled with choking smoke, but Zach pushed on. That's when he saw him. Speaker, the arrogant Daxamite ambassador, strutting through the debris without a care. The grey-skinned alien looked almost gleeful at the carnage. Zach's eyes narrowed. Something wasn't right. Zach tailed Speaker through the ruined port, keeping to the shadows, using his intimate knowledge of the station's layout to stay hidden in maintenance ducts and behind cargo crates. The Daxamite wove a winding path into the guts of the port, to a dingy area used for waste processing. There, in the dim green lighting, Speaker met with a group of figures wearing dark cloaks. Zach snuck closer, straining to hear. "The invasion plans are ready," Speaker said, voice a guttural rasp. "The experimental plasma lances have been installed on all destroyers. Zexon 3 will fall in a matter of hours." "And the intel I provided?" one figure asked. "My payment?" Speaker laughed, a cruel sound. "Ah yes, your precious credits. They're being—" Zach's heart pounded. An invasion. Experimental weapons. He had to warn someone. He backed up, intending to slip away, but his heel caught on an exposed pipe. He tumbled, knocking a metal crate to the floor with a resounding clang that echoed through the chamber. The cloaked figures whirled. Spiker's red eyes locked onto Zach. "Spy! Get him!" "Shit, shit, shit!" Zach swore, scrambling to his feet. He sprinted into the maze of corridors as plasma bolts shot past, superheating the air. Alarms started blaring. Zach's mind raced, running through the port schematics. There, an access hatch to the hangar bay. Zach slammed the door controls and leapt through, the hatch sealing behind him. He tumbled into the hangar, startling a group of reptilian Zorgans. No time to explain. He made a beeline for the nearest ship, a small courier vessel. The ramp was open, thank God. Plasma blasts seared the deck as Spiker and his goons ran into the hangar, pushing past the confused Zorgans. Zach's hands flew over the ship controls. The engines hummed to life. "Stop him!" Spiker bellowed, firing his sidearm. The ship jolted as its thrusters engaged, but not before something thunked against the hull. Zach had no time to check what it was. He accelerated out of the hangar, the force slamming him back into the seat, as Spiker's enraged face disappeared behind him. Zach punched in the coordinates for the nearest human outpost, hands shaking from the flood of adrenaline. His mind spun, trying to process all he'd heard. Invasion. Plasma lances. It far exceeded anything he'd seen, even from the advanced Daxamites. Something bigger was going on, maybe bigger than one planet. But what? As the stars blurred into the swirling vortex of FTL, Zach knew he had to find out. Failure was still not an option. Zach's stolen ship dropped out of FTL, the human outpost growing large in the view screen. His hands flew across the comms panel. "Mayday, Mayday! This is Zachary Allen requesting emergency docking. I have critical intel on an imminent Daxamite invasion." "Zach, is that you?" Captain Salazar's gruff voice crackled over the speakers. "You're not cleared for—" "Sir, there's no time," Zach interrupted. "The Daxamites are planning to attack Zexon 3 with experimental plasma weapons. We need to warn them." A pause, then docking bay 2 now. Zach brought the ship in hard, the landing struts slamming onto the deck. He was out and running before the ramp finished extending, booted feet pounding metal. He burst into the command center, startling the officers on duty. Captain Salazar stood at the central hollow table, his dark eyes hard as flint. "Explain." Zach did, the words spilling out in a rush. He told Salazar everything, overhearing the Daxamite plot, the experimental lances, the impending invasion. As he spoke, Salazar's face turned grim. "Zexon 3 is our largest mining colony," the captain said when Zach finished. "Losing it would cripple our resource supply lines." Salazar began barking orders, the command deck erupting into controlled chaos. Alerts blared as the outpost mobilized for war. Troops rushed to battle stations, pilots sprinted for their fighters, engineering teams scrambled to bring the outpost's defenses online. Zach sagged against a bulkhead, exhaustion hitting him like a freight train. He'd done his part, warned them. Now it was up to... The deck shuddered. Alarms screamed. Zach whipped around to stare at the view screens. A Daxamite warship hung in space, plasma lances glowing with deadly light. "Incoming," Salazar roared. The Daxamite ship fired. Beams of star-hot plasma slammed into the outpost's shields, sending arcs of crackling energy skittering across the barrier. The deck heaved. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks. "Shields at 60%, an officer yelled. "They're punching right through." Salazar cursed. "Get our guns in the fight." "Weapon systems not responding. They must have been damaged in the first volley." Zach pushed off the wall. "I can fix them." Salazar met his gaze, understanding passing between them. He nodded. "Go." Zach ran, racing through the shaking corridors. He reached the gunwells, the massive accelerator cannons sitting dark and silent. Sparks flew as he ripped open access panels, his hands a blur as he rerouted power, bypassed fused circuits, jury-rigged firing controls. The ship quaked. The bulkheads groaned. Sweat poured down Zack's face, but he couldn't stop. There, a hum of building charge. The guns were back online. Zack keyed his comms. Weapons ready. "Fire!" Salazar commanded. The cannons spoke, lances of blue-white plasma streaking towards the Daxamite ship. The enemy's shields flared, absorbing the hits. Then the Daxamite guns fired again, the beams tearing through hull plating like paper. Explosions chained across the outpost's surface. "Breach in Sector 12, someone yelled. "Emergency bulkheads not responding." Zack whirled, sprinting for the breach section. He could seal it, patch the hull, stop the cascade failure. He had to. As he ran, a figure stepped out from the billowing smoke. "Speaker." The Daxamite smiled, his grey skin lit by the red emergency lights. "Zack, how nice to see you again." Zack skidded to a stop, fists clenching. "Spiker, I should have known you'd be leading this attack." "Attack? No, this is merely aggressive negotiation." Speaker stalked forward, his movements liquid, predatory. "Though I must admit, your meddling has become quite the thorn in my side. It's time I dealt with you permanently." Speaker lunged. Zack met him head-on. They slammed together like crashing trains, a whirlwind of punches and kicks. Speaker was faster, stronger, his Daxamite physiology granting him inhuman power. But Zack was driven by something more. He fought with human ferocity, his blows fueled by desperate fury. They traded hits back and forth, Zack feeling his ribs crack, his knuckles split. But he pushed through the pain, grappling with Spiker, slamming the alien against the bulkheads again and again. In the command center, Salazar watched the fight unfold on the security feeds. His jaw clenched. They were losing. The Daxamite ship tore their defenses apart, and Speaker was steadily wearing Zack down. "Reroute all power to the forward guns," Salazar ordered, his voice hard as steel. "Divert from life support if you have to. We're ending this." The lights dimmed. The air grew thin. But the cannons glowed brighter than ever, thrumming with barely contained energy. "Target their engines and fire." The guns unleashed their payload. The plasma beams punched clean through the Daxamite shields, stabbing deep into the enemy ship's stern. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Daxamite engines detonated in a blinding flash, the explosion ripping the ship apart from the inside out. In the corridors, Zack and Spiker were locked in a brutal clinch, trading crushing knee strikes and elbow smashes. The shockwave from the exploding ship hit the outpost like a hammer, sending them tumbling. Zack rolled to his feet, wiping blood from his eyes. His chest heaved as he scanned the smoke for Speaker. The Daxamite was gone, likely fleeing back to his own ship to escape the outpost's destruction. "This isn't over," Zack growled, staggering towards the breach. He had a job to do, an outpost to save, no matter the cost. Zack coughed, the acrid smoke stinging his eyes as he limped away from the crumbling Daxamite stronghold. His body ached, bruises and cuts marring his skin, a testament to the brutal fight with Speaker. But he had no time to rest. The intel they'd gathered was too critical. Captain Salazar and the other operatives were waiting at the extraction point, their stolen Daxamite shuttle prepped for launch. Zack stumbled aboard, his breathing ragged. "Did you get it?" Salazar asked, his voice tight with tension. Zack nodded, pulling a data drive from his pocket. "Everything, their plans, their tech, the AI, it's all here." Salazar took the drive, his jaw clenched. "Good work, now let's get the hell out of here." The shuttle lifted off, engines screaming as it tore through the atmosphere. In the distance, the stronghold collapsed in on itself, a plume of dust and debris rising into the sky. In the shuttle's cramped hold, Zack and the team huddled around a console, poring over the stolen data. What they found made their blood run cold. The Daxamites weren't just planning an invasion. They were building an army, powered by an AI of unimaginable sophistication, an AI designed for one purpose: conquest. "They call it the Overlord," Zack said, his voice hollow. "A neural network that can control every aspect of their military, strategy, tactics, even individual soldiers, all slave to a single, relentless will." My God, Salazar whispered. With something like that, they could conquer the entire galaxy. And we're the only ones who know about it, Zack said. He looked up, meeting Salazar's gaze. We have to stop them. The captain nodded grimly. We will. We'll take this intel back to command, mobilize every force we have. This isn't just about one planet anymore. It's about the fate of the entire human race. Zack leaned back, his mind racing. He thought of Speaker, of the hatred in the Daxamites' eyes. This was bigger than their rivalry now, bigger than any one person. But as he stared out at the stars streaking past the viewports, Zack couldn't shake the feeling that his fight with Speaker was far from over, that their destinies were intertwined, locked on a collision course that could decide the fate of galaxies. He clenched his fists, ignoring the pain from his battered knuckles. Whatever came next, he would be ready. He had to be. For the sake of everything he held dear, failure was not an option. The shuttle hurtled through the void, carrying its precious cargo of knowledge and hope. And in the hearts of every man and woman aboard beat a single, unshakable conviction. The Daxamites would be stopped. No matter the cost, no matter the sacrifice, humanity would prevail. As they raced towards an uncertain future, Zack closed his eyes, steeling himself for the battles to come. Zack and Captain Salazar pored over the stolen Daxamite data, searching for any weakness they could exploit. The Overlord AI was the key to the Daxamites' conquest, and they knew they had to destroy it at any cost. If we can take out the flagship's main power core, Zack said, pointing at a schematic, it should disable the AI long enough for us to upload a virus and fry its circuits. Salazar nodded grimly. It won't be easy. That ship will be heavily guarded. Leave that to me, Zack said, his jaw set. I have a score to settle with Speaker. They rallied what remained of the human fleet, reaching out to other races who had suffered under the Daxamites' rule. The Zorgons pledged their support, as did the Dresians, eager for a chance at vengeance. It was a tenuous alliance, built on desperation and a shared enemy. But it would have to do. The attack came swiftly, the Allied ships dropping out of FTL in perfect formation. Zack led the charge in a nimble fighter craft, weaving through the Daxamite defenses with daring skill. Plasma fire crisscrossed the void, ships exploding in bursts of searing light. Zack's strike team punched through the flagship's shields, landing in its cavernous hangar bay. They fought their way through ranks of Daxamite soldiers, Zack's blaster spitting lethal bolts of energy. Then he saw him, Spiker standing on a raised platform, his face twisted in a sneer. Zack didn't hesitate. He launched himself at the Daxamite commander, their bodies slamming together. They traded blows in a whirlwind of violence, fists and feet crashing against armor and flesh. Speaker was strong, his Daxamite physiology granting him inhuman power, but Zack fought with the fury of a man with nothing left to lose. He pummeled Speaker, driving him back, cracking his armor with the force of his attacks. But the Daxamite refused to fall. With a roar of defiance, Speaker lunged for a control panel, his fist slamming down on a glowing button. The ship shuddered. A deep metallic voice echoed through the halls. Overlord AI activated, assuming control. Zack's eyes widened. Speaker had activated the AI, hoping to turn the tide. But Zack had planned for this. During his infiltration of the stronghold, he had planted a virus, a digital Trojan horse, within the Overlord's core programming. The AI began to stutter, its voice distorting. Daxamite soldiers clutched their heads, screaming as their neural implants overloaded. The flagship's systems went haywire, doors slamming open and closed, gravity fluctuating wildly. Seizing his chance, Zack lunged at Speaker, channeling all his rage and pain into one final devastating blow. His fist connected with the Daxamite's jaw with a sickening crunch. Speaker crumpled, his eyes rolling back in his head. Zack staggered back, his chest heaving. Around him, the strike team secured the bridge, the Overlord AI sparking and sputtering as it tore itself apart. Outside, the Allied fleet pressed their advantage, tearing into the disarrayed Daxamite ships. Explosions bloomed like fiery flowers as the enemy fleet crumbled, their formation shattering like glass. It was a victory, hard won and bloody. But as Zack looked around at the cheering soldiers, humans and aliens alike, he felt a hollow ache in his chest. The Alliance had achieved its goal, but already he could see the cracks forming, old grudges and distrusts resurfacing. He thought of all he had lost, all he had sacrificed. His home, his friends, his very identity. The war had taken everything from him, leaving only a hardened shell of a man, forged in the crucible of conflict. As the flagship burned around him, Zack made a decision. He couldn't stay, couldn't watch as the fragile peace they had bought with blood inevitably unraveled. He slipped away in the chaos, commandeering a small scout ship. As he plotted a course for the unknown reaches of space, he cast one last look at the Allied fleet, at the battered remnants of the life he was leaving behind. The stars stretched out before him, cold and infinite. Zack didn't know what the future held, what new challenges and threats awaited him in the vast expanse of the galaxy, but he knew one thing for certain. His fight was far from over. In the wreckage of the flagship, a hand stirred. Spicker, his face a ruined mess, pulled himself from the debris. His eyes burned with unquenchable hatred as he watched Zack's ship disappear into the void. "This isn't over," he rasped, blood bubbling from his lips. "I will find you, human, and I will make you suffer for what you've done." The Daxamite dragged himself to an escape pod, his mind already racing with schemes of revenge. Zack had won this battle, but the war was just beginning. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.